today's class, we are going to talk about game theory. Game theory is a mathematical model that is used in decision making. Decision making situation can be classified into three. We have the probabilistic situation, deterministic situation, and the uncertainty situation. Before we solve question, let's first talk about the basic terminologies in game theory. The first terminology of game theory that we're going to talk about is player. Game theory is a game of two players. Another terminology that we're going to talk about in game theory is strategy. The strategy can be classified into two. We have the pure strategy and the mixed strategy. A strategy is said to be pure if the player adopts only a single strategy. You understand? For example, a company can have various ways of maximizing its profit, but if it chooses only one strategy, if it chooses only one way of maximizing its profit, that means the company adopts pure strategy. Do you understand? So let's say a player adopts more than one strategy. That means that strategy is said to be a mixed strategy. Do you understand? So among the various strategies that a player has, if he selects only one and ignore the others, in that case, the player is said to adopt pure strategy. Let's say a player has the following strategy. The player has maybe P1, P2, P3, and P4. Let's say a player has the following strategy, and then the player selects only one strategy. In that case, let's say the player selects strategy 4. Do you understand? The player selects strategy 4. In that case, the probability of strategy 1 will be what? 0. The probability of strategy 2 will be what? 0. The probability of strategy 3 will be what? 0. The probability of strategy 4, which the player selects, will be what? 1. And it should also be noted that the sum of all the probability will be what? 1. Are you getting it? So for this, I'm going to have 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1, which is equals to what? 1. Do you understand? In that case, we can say the player adopts pure strategy. Now, what do we mean by mixed strategy? As we have discussed earlier, a player is said to adopt a mixed strategy if among the various strategies that the player has, he selects more than one strategy. Do you understand? In that case, the probability of individual strategy will be less than 1. Do you understand? I want you to understand this is very, very simple. These are the basic concepts that you have to understand, so that when we are solving the question, on game theory, you are going to have a very thorough knowledge. Are you getting it? So when a player adopts more than one strategy, you understand? Let's say the player has the same strategy, P1, P2, P3, and P4. In mixed strategy, the player can adopt strategy P1, P2, and P3. Do you understand? In that case, that is said to be mixed strategy. Therefore, the probability of all these strategies will be less than 1, such that when we sum up all their probability, we are going to have 1 at the end of the day. Do you understand? So let's say the player adopts strategy 1, strategy 2, strategy 3. So in that case, strategy 1, which is P1, can be equals to 0.1. The probability of strategy 1. The probability of strategy 2 can be equals to 0.2. The probability of strategy 3 can be equals to 0.7. Because the player does not select strategy 4. So the probability of strategy 4 will be equals to what? 0. Do you understand? So at the end of the day, if we sum up all this probability, we must get 1. Do you understand? Therefore, the probability of each individual strategy will be less than 1. But by the time we sum up all the probability of all the strategy, we must get 1. Now let's try. This will be what? 0.1 plus 0.2 plus 0.7, which is equals to what? 1. Do you understand? Another concept that we are going to discuss in this class is payoff matrix. A typical payoff matrix looks like this. Okay, this is the payoff matrix. Here, on this payoff matrix, we have two players. The first player is player A, and the second player is player B. Also, on this payoff matrix, we have strategies. The strategies that each player has is 1, 2, and 3. Player A has 1, 2, and 3 as a strategy. Player B also has 1, 2, and 3 as a strategy. Also, on this payoff matrix, we have the various outcomes of each strategy of the players. Do you understand? So we have player A and player B, and we have the strategies that each player has, and also we have the outcomes of each strategies. Do you understand? So a payoff matrix shows the outcomes of the various strategies that the player has. Do you understand? So I want you to put this down. Note, if the outcome of the game is positive. Okay, now let me tell you how to determine the outcome of a game. If player A selects the first strategy, this is the first strategy. Strategy 1 is the first strategy. If player A selects the first strategy, that is, we are going to have this row. Don't forget that player A is in rows and player B strategy is in what? Column. Do you understand? So if player A selects the first strategy, which is the first row, you understand, and player B selects the second strategy, the outcome of the game will be 20. Do you understand? The outcome of the game is the intersection point. Are you get what I'm saying? The value at the intercept of the strategies of the both player, that is the outcome of the game. Do you understand? For example, if player A selects the first strategy, so I'm going to have something like, let me use another marker. I'm going to have something like this. This is the first strategy. If player A selects the first strategy, I'm going to have something like this. And if player B selects the second strategy, I'm going to have something like this. Do you understand? So the intercept of these strategies is what I call the outcome. You understand? So the outcome of this game is 20. Do you understand how I got the outcome? Now I want to pen this down. Peradventure, if the outcome of the game is positive, as you can see, the outcome of this game is positive here. It is a gain for player A and a loss for player B. Do you understand what I just said? If the outcome of the game is positive, it is important to note that. If the outcome of the game is positive, it is a gain for player A, that is the player that is here. It is a gain for the player that is here, and a loss for the player that is here. Do you understand? Peradventure, if when we take the outcome of the game, the outcome is negative, it is a loss for player A and a gain for player B. Now, when we talk about game theory, you see, the proportion of what a player lost will be the proportion that another player will gain. Do you understand? The proportion that maybe player A lost 40, that is the amount that player B will gain. Okay, let me cite this example. In a soccer, we always have two teams on the field. Let's say we have team A and team B. We have team A and team B. You understand? Let's say team A score 1 and team A, at the end of the match, team A has 1 and team B has 0. In that case, we can say that team B has lost 1 to team A. Do you understand? So the proportion that a player gains is the proportion that the other player lost. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it is very important that you note those 2 points. If the outcome of a game is positive, it is a gain for the player that is here and a loss for the player that is here. Do you understand? Peradventure, if when we take the outcome of the game, maybe we got negative 40, it is a loss for the player that is here, which is player A, and a gain for the player that is on the column side, which is player B. Okay, another concept that we are going to talk about is the principle that is used in game theory. There are 2 principles that is used in game theory. The first principle is the maximum principle, and the second principle is the minimax principle. The maximum principle is adopted by the player that is here. Do you understand? And the minimax principle is adopted by the player that is here. The maximum principle means, let me just put it down. You can pen it down. Maximum. That is, player A want to maximize the minimum possible benefit. Are you getting it? The player that is here want to maximize the minimum possible benefit. Then the minimax. The minimax principle is adopted by this player. The player that is in the column side, that is we adopt this principle. And the minimax principle, this player will try to minimize the maximum possible loss. You understand? Player A will adopt the maximum principle. Do you understand? That is the maximum of the minimum. He will try to maximize the possible benefit, possible profit. Are you getting what I'm saying? player B will try to minimize the maximum loss. You understand? So player A is adopting this principle and player B is adopting what? The minimax principle. It is very important to note that. Another concept, another term that we're going to discuss in game theory is the saddle point. The saddle point is the point whereby the maximum value and the minimax value is equal. Don't worry, if you didn't understand, just pay attention. As we progress and solve a single question, you will understand the basic term that we are discussing on game theory. So the saddle point is the point whereby the maximum value and the minimax value is equal. Are you getting it? That is where we call the saddle point. Another term that we're going to discuss in this class is the value of the game. It is possible for a game to have a saddle point and it is possible for a game not to have a saddle point. So peradventure, if a game has a saddle point, the value of the cell of that saddle point is what is called the value of the game. Are you getting it? The value, don't forget, I said saddle point is the point where the maximum value is equal to the minimax value. You understand? So a saddle point we can determine the value of the game through the saddle point. Another term that we are going to talk about in this class is two-person zero sum. You know, in game theory, there are various types of games. For example, we can have a game with positive sum, a game with negative sum, and a game with zero sum. So a typical example is what we are describing in this class, two-person zero sum. If a game involves two players, as we can see on this board, if a game involves two players and the loss of a player is equal to the gains of another, in that case, the sum of their gains and loss is equal to what? Zero. That is why we call it two-person zero sum. That is two players zero sum. You understand? When we sum up the losses that each a particular player has and the gains that another player has, we sum it together, we got zero. In that case, we have two-person zero sum game. There are various types of games. You understand what I'm saying? So in order to understand more about game theory, you can hit the subscribe button and click on the notification bell so that when I drop another class, you are going to get updates. Now let's proceed to solve a typical example on game theory. Let's look at the pure strategy first. Having discussed the basic terminologies in game theory, now let's solve this example. We are told to find the optimal strategies of the players in this game. Recall in our previous discussion, I told you that player A will adopt maximum principle. Maximum principle. This is N, okay? This is N, maximum principle. And player B will adopt the minimax principle. Minimax. Do you understand? So this is an example on pure strategy. That is, both players select a single strategy. Are you get what I'm saying? This is a typical example on pure strategy game. You understand? So
now let me start by explaining what we mean by maximum principle. As the name sounds, maximum, that is maximum of the minimum. Don't forget that it is player A that is adopting the maximum principle. In that case, player A will select the minimum among all the three strategies that he has. Then after selecting the minimum among the strategy that he has, then he's going to choose the maximum among those minimum. Do you understand? So that is why we call it maximum of the minimum. And for player B, he's going to select the maximum among his strategy. Then after selecting the maximum among that maximum, he's going to choose the minimum. Do you understand?
So in this side, I'm going to have row minimum, and in this side, I'm going to have column maximum. You understand? This is column UMN, column maximum. So I'm going to have another this, and for this I'm going to have. Now, please, it is very simple. Just pay attention, okay? So player B is adopting minimax principle. In that case, that means I'm going to find the minimum of each strategy, the maximum of each strategy. Then I'm going to choose the minimum. That is the minimum of the maximum. for this is maximin, that is the maximum of the minimum. So I'm first going to find the minimum and then chooses the maximum. That is for player A. Do you understand? So let's find the minimum. The minimum of 20 among 25, 20 and 35 is what? 20. So the minimum here is 20. The minimum of 50, 45, 55 is 45. The minimum of 58, 40, 42 is 40. Are you getting it? So I'm going to choose the maximum among this minimum. That is why we call it maximum principle. So the maximum here is what? 45. So 45 is the what? Maximum value. Maximum value. Maximum value. Do you understand? So 45 is the maximum value. Now let's find the minimax value. The first step is that we are going to find the column maximum of each strategy. So the maximum here is what? 58. The maximum in this column is 45. The maximum in this column is what? 55. So having determined the maximum value, we are going to choose the minimum among the maximum. Don't forget, player B is adopting the minimax principle. Minimum of the maximum. You understand? Select the minimum among the maximum value that you have already found. That is it. You understand? So what is the minimum among these values? The minimum is 45. So the minimax value is what? 45. So now let me ask you a question. Do we have a saddle point in this game, or we don't have a saddle point? Yeah, we have a saddle point, because saddle point is the point whereby the maximum value is equals to the minimax value. And that case, that is what? 45. You understand? So 45, this is the saddle point. So now, how do we determine the value of the game? The value of the game is the value of the cell whereby we have our saddle point. Don't forget. So the value of this game is what? 45. So the value, which is V, is equals to what? 45. Do you understand? So now, let us take the probability. Let's say we are told to maybe just show the probability of the strategy of player B and player A. Now, the probability of player A, let's start with A. The probability of player A is this. Now, player A will not choose the first strategy because he doesn't have a saddle point there. You understand? So the probability of the first strategy, which is this, for player A is what? 0. Do you understand? So the probability of player A choosing the second strategy will be what? 1, because this is a pure strategy game. You understand? And I told you that a pure strategy game is a game whereby the players only select a single strategy out of the various strategies that they have. In that case, the player A will select the second strategy because that is where he has the saddle point. For this, I'm going to have 1 for the second strategy. Then for the third strategy, since it is player A is not going to select the third strategy, that means I'm going to have 0 as the probability. So for this, I'm going to have 0 plus 1 plus 0. This is what? 1. So the sum of the probability is what? 1. So let's say for player B. For player B, please, you have to understand this, okay? It's very, very simple. Just pay attention. Now, for player B will not choose the first strategy because the first strategy does not maximize. It doesn't minimize the maximum loss. You understand? So it's not going to select the first strategy. For this, I'm going to have 0 also. So let's see. It's going to select the second strategy because that is the strategy that minimizes the maximum loss that it can have. So for this, I'm going to have 1. So, and for the third strategy, it's not going to select it. That is what? 0. So I'm going to have 0 plus 1 plus 0, which is what? 1. So you can see now, the sum of the probability of each strategy is what? 1. Are you getting it? So that is for pure strategy game. The value of this game is 45 and the saddle point is also what? 45. Do you understand? So now, let's look at a problem with mixed strategy. We are told to determine the value of this game. Now, to determine the value of the game, let's try and find the saddle point. So player A will adopt the maximum strategy, and player B will adopt the minimax strategy. So let's find the value of the game. Okay, minimax strategy. So let us find the row minimum for this, and the column maximum. Column maximum. Don't shorten it in your exam, write it in full, okay? The row minimum here is what? 7. The row minimum between 5 and 11 is what? 5. The maximum among 9 and 5 is what? 9. The maximum among 2 and 11 is what? Is 11. So we have taken the row minimum and the column maximum. You can see now from this game, there is no saddle point. Now, in order to determine the value of this game, we have to make use of the mixed strategy. Do you understand? So when you are taking the value of the game and the game does not have a saddle point, in that case, you proceed to use the mixed strategy. Do you understand? So since the maximin is not equals to the minimax, that is, the maximum here is what? 7. The minimum here is 9. So that is 7 is not equals to what? 9. So therefore we cannot, this game does not have a saddle point. Okay, to determine the value of the game using the mixed strategy, the first step is that we are going to find the oddment of the rows and column. Oddment means taking the difference of each row and writing it against each other. You understand? So let's start with the first, with the row. Are you getting what I'm saying? Let me write it. Oddment. And this also oddment. Okay, now, so let's take the difference between the first row. This is the first row, okay? You can see this is strategy 1. This is the first strategy. So for this, I'm going to have 9. And also, I want you to note that when you are taking the oddment of each strategy, always put the higher number, the higher value. Always write it first, okay? So we're going to have 9 minus 7. So I'm going to have 2. 9 minus 7 is 2. So for this, I'm going to write it against the second row. Do you understand? 9 minus 7, 2. Write it against the second row. That is the second strategy. That is what we call an oddment. Okay. For this, I'm going to have 11 minus 5. So that will be what? 6. So I'm going to write it against the first strategy. That is what? 6. Do you understand how I take the oddment? Oddment means taking the difference between the rows and the column and writing it against each other. You take the difference of the first row, write it against the second row. Take the difference of the second row, write it against the first row. You understand? So let's proceed to the column. For this, I'm going to have 9 minus 5. That is 4, right? So I'm going to write 4 against the what? This 4 against the second strategy. That is the second column. So 11 minus 7. That is what? 4. So I'm going to write it here. That is what we call the oddment. Now, having taken the oddment, the next step is that we're going to take the probability. For this, I'm going to take the probability of this row 1, probability of row 2. Let me call this C1, oddment 1, and oddment 2. We are going to take the probability of each oddment. Do you understand? So the probability of 6, don't forget, loss of probability is what? Required successful outcome all over total possible outcome. Do you understand? That is the general formula of probability outcome. Do you understand? So to get the probability of 6 will be what? Which is for row 1, which is for this oddment. You understand? The probability of 6, which is PR6, will be what? 6, which is the successful outcome, all over 6 plus 2, which is the sum of the total outcome. The sum of the total outcome is what? 6 plus 2. So for this, I'm going to have 6 over 8. 6 over 8 is what? 3 over 2, 3 over 4. Do you understand? I just reduce it. So let's take the probability of this. The probability of this oddment, which is 2. The probability of 2 is what? 2 all over 2 plus 6. You understand? It's just like taking this 2, which is here, all over the sum. That is the total possible outcome. You understand? So for this, I'm going to have 2 over 8, which is what? 1 over 4. Do you understand? Okay, let's go to this column. We have C1. The probability of obtaining 4, that will be what? PR4, what? 4 all over 4 plus 4, which is the sum. You understand what I'm saying? 4 over 4 plus 4, that will be what? 4 over 8, which is what? 1 over 2. So the probability of obtaining the 4 of the second column, that will be what? 4 over also 4 plus 4, which is what? 4 over 8. That will be what? 1 over 2. So this is what? For this, I'm going to have 1 over 2, 1 over 2. And for this, for the probability of 6, probability of obtaining augment 6, that is what? 3 over 4. So for this, I'm going to have 3 over 4. And for this, I'm going to have 1 over 4. Do you understand how I got this? If you didn't understand, kindly pause the video or reverse the video and watch the video from that point again. Do you understand? Now, having determined the probability of each strategy, now, in order to determine the value of the game, multiply any of this column by the corresponding augment and divide it by the sum of the augment. Do you understand? Multiply any of this column by the corresponding augment and divide it by the sum of the augment. Do you understand? So for this, I'm going to choose column 1. That is strategy 1 for player B. I'm going to choose column 1. So the formula is this: multiply the column value is equals to column. That is if you are using column multiplied by corresponding augment all over the sum of augments. You see, let me tell you, when you got to this point, you can make use of column or row to determine the value of your game. Do you understand? I'm going to show you, okay? But let's start with the column first. Let's start with the first column, which is for strategy 1 for player B. So the value according to the first column will be what? The column value 9 multiplied by the corresponding augment, which is 6. So for this, I'm going to have 9 multiplied by 6 plus the second value in the column is 5. So 5 multiplied by corresponding augment, which is 2. 5 multiplied by 2 all over the sum of the augment. The sum of this augment is what? 6 plus 2. So I'm going to have 6 plus 2. Do you understand how I got to this point? If you didn't understand, kindly reverse and watch the video from that point again. So for this, I'm going to have V, which is the value, is equals to 9 plus 9 multiplied by 6, that is 54. 54 plus 5 multiplied by 2, that is 10, all over 8. 54 plus 10, that is 64. 64 divided by 8, that is what? 8. So the value of this game, according to column 1, is what? 8. Now, let's try column 2. Now, we are still going to use the formula. Column, multiply the column by the corresponding augment and divide it by the sum of augments. Do you understand? So for this, according to column 2, which is what? Don't forget, column always belongs to the player that is here. That is the strategy 2 for player B. So for this, I'm going to have 7 multiplied by augment. So I'm going to have 7 multiplied by 6 plus 11 multiplied by 2, put in bracket, all over 6 plus 2. Okay, punch your calculator. 7 multiplied by 6, 42. So for this, I'm going to have 42. 42 plus 22 all over 8. Do you understand? 42 plus 22, that is 64. So 64 all over 8, that is what? 8. Have you seen it? So we got the same value when we use any of the column. So to determine the value of the game using the row, are you getting what I'm saying? What is row? Row means here, Abby. That is, this is row and this is column. Are you getting what I'm saying? And row belongs to what? Player A. So to determine the value of the game with reference to player A, we are going to multiply the value of each row by the corresponding augment and divide it by the sum of the augment. Do you understand? Multiply the value of each row by the corresponding augment and divide it by the sum of the augment. So let's start with the first row. The first row is what? 9 and 7, Abby. So let's start with 9. For this, I'm going to have 9 multiplied by corresponding augment of 9 is what? 4. You understand? So for this, I'm going to have 9 multiplied by 4 plus 7 multiplied by 4 all over 4 plus 4. Do you understand? So 9 multiplied by 4, that is 36. 36 plus 28 all over 8. Do you understand? So if you punch your calculator, 36 plus 48, 28, that is 64. 64 divided by 8, that is what? 8. So the value of the game here is also what? 8. Do you understand? So let's use the second row. For the second row, this is the second row, 5 and 11. So for this, I'm going to have the value, which is v, is equals to 5 multiplied by the corresponding oddment, which is 4, plus 11 multiplied by 4, all over 4 plus 4. Do you understand? So 5 multiplied by 4, that is 20. 11 multiplied by 4, that is 44. All over 8, 4 plus 4, that is 8. So for this, I'm going to have v is equals to 20 plus 44, that is what? 64. So 64 all over 8, that is what? That is 8. Do you understand? So the value of the game is what? 8. So that is how to solve a game theory involving mixed strategy. See you in the next class. Bye.